People alive in the rubble. In fact, they've been receiving mobile phone calls from victims trapped in the remains of the World Trade Center. But those emergency crews are also certain to find thousands of bodies. The world is shell-shocked tonight. People around the globe are struggling to comprehend the scale of this disaster, which began as an American Airlines jet approached Lower Manhattan.
There was no warning as the first hijacked aircraft, a Boeing 767, slammed into the World Trade Center just before 9 in the morning. It was a terrorist attack that struck at the heart of America. The 110-storey skyscraper engulfed in flames. As smoke billowed from the building, up to 50,000 people who worked there began evacuating as fire raged through the upper floors. On any scale, this was already a major disaster. But then, the unthinkable. Another hijacked passenger jet came screaming in, aimed directly at the second tower. The aircraft disappearing inside the building on impact and exploding.
No words, no reason.
And we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows.
Wreckage blasting out of the upper floors, sending tons of debris plunging to the street below. The fires raging out of control, panic on the street below as office workers began fleeing in terror from New York's financial district.
I don't know.
What's happening?
It's believed more than 20,000 people were still trapped inside, some appearing at windows, pleading to be rescued, others plunging to their deaths as flames forced them to jump.
Something else has just happened at the World Trade Center. As you can see, one of the towers either has come down, perhaps something else has happened. The billow of smoke that we have not seen, the tower is down completely, according to our producer. The side of the tower has come down onto the street.
The collapse caught on tape by an amateur cameraman.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car.
Lower Manhattan blanketed by an enormous cloud of dust and smoke. The entire drama played out live on television around the world. Crushed beneath the rubble, hundreds involved in the rescue effort. At least 300 firefighters are dead or missing, along with more than 70 police officers. The terror of the collapse witnessed by this man inside the remaining tower.
I was on the ground floor of the building, sitting in a chair, waiting for somebody to turn up, as you do. There was a huge bang. It felt to me like somebody dropped a skip full of rubbish, a great container full of rubbish from a very great height.
30 minutes after the first collapse, the second tower began to crumple as well, crashing from the top down.
And there, as you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the top portion of which is collapsing. Good Lord. There are no words. You can see large pieces of the building falling. You can see the smoke rising.
On the ground, more panic, shocked rescuers running for their lives. The collapse of these towers, once the world's tallest buildings, sending thousands of tons of rubble into the streets, trapping workers in nearby buildings, crushing cars, leaving the world shocked at the scale of the attack. As Americans struggle to comprehend the enormity of the disaster unfolding in New York, a third hijacked jetliner crashed into the Pentagon building in Washington. The headquarters of the US military supposedly impenetrable, the impact sending the aircraft spearing through the building into the inner courtyard. More than 800 people at work inside the Pentagon are believed to have lost their lives. A woman aboard this plane managed to make 2 phone calls before the crash, telling of men armed with knives forcing all the passengers and one of the pilots to the rear. aviation authorities closed US airspace, ordering an estimated 4,000 aircraft to land at the nearest airport. US warplanes were scrambled, streaking over New York and Washington. The terrorists behind these attacks had hijacked a fourth jet, a Boeing 757, which crashed near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There's speculation its intended target was the presidential retreat at Camp David. All up, 2 United Airlines flights were hijacked, along with another 2 planes belonging to American Airlines. None of the 266 passengers and crew aboard the 4 airliners survived. Amid fears the attacks would continue, the US Secret Service threw a security cordon around President Bush.
Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
He was hurried aboard Air Force One, lifting off for a secure destination as US forces around the world were placed on high alert. Back in New York, rescuers made their way into the impact zone, a virtual moonscape dusted with debris.
These are professionals. They're coming out of there looking literally stunned, in shock, many of them.
Hundreds of ambulances on standby. All hospitals in the greater New York area are now reported full, with thousands of people injured in the attack. Authorities unable to predict how high the eventual death toll will go.
The numbers are going to be very, very high.
Mr. Mayor,
just if you think of the number of people that were in the building at the time.
The terrorists striking not only at the US military, but also paralysing Wall Street, the world's busiest stock market. Returning to the White House, President Bush vowing the US won't rest until those behind the terror attacks are caught.
The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
On any assessment, this attack on the United States was an outstanding success for the terrorists, a monumental failure for US intelligence agencies, which had no hint of the disaster about to befall them. But America remains unified in its determination to fight terrorism, members of Congress from both sides of politics coming together on the steps of the Capitol.
God bless America, my home, sweet home.
John Hill, 10 News.
And our reporter in New York, Michelle Stone, was caught amid the horror. Now, Michelle, I understand some details are starting to emerge about the men who committed these acts.
That's exactly right, and forgive me if my teeth chatter because it's a wee bit cold. What we do know is that there were teams of 3 to 5 men aboard these planes, at least 2 of the planes, armed with knives. And just a few minutes ago I heard that at least on one plane that several flight attendants were stabbed quite badly, and most of the passengers pushed to the back of the plane, including the pilot. So obviously these teams had amongst them men who knew how to fly commercial jetliners. I can also tell you that the FBI has taken a hold of the passenger manifests, and they have recognised on those manifests names of people who appeared on so-called watch lists, men who, if they were to attempt to enter the US, should be arrested. Those leads have led them to Florida, to 2 locations in South Florida, in Hollywood and Daytona. I can also tell you that behind me, the location of the impact is still aflame, it's still burning. Surrounding buildings are still alight. They have pulled 3 people from the rubble now, including 2 policemen that are alive. They believe that survivors still exist beneath that rubble and are trying to get out on, or are getting out on mobile phones.
And Michelle, we're hearing some heartbreaking stories from the rescue scene.
Yeah, well, as I said, there are still people trapped beneath that rubble and they are making contact on their mobile phones. There are also victims calling who are trapped in nearby buildings. The 3 people that incredibly have survived, I can't expect that there will be many more people who will survive this terrible tragedy. The city has mobilised. There are people lining up around the block across Manhattan to give blood, and that scenario is being played out across the nation. There is a critical shortage of blood, as you can imagine. I can also tell you that there was to be an IMF World Bank conference here in New York. There are suggestions that that will be cancelled. It was scheduled for next week. Nobody here seems to have the stomach for the protest that was supposed to attract. There are aircraft destroyers moving into New York City Harbor, which is about 20 meters from where we are now. They're also positioning themselves off the west coast, off the city of Seattle. Now, because it's America, there are polls, and the latest polls say that 87% of Americans expect another attack. I am among those, even though I'm Australian and not American, I do expect another attack. 86% of Americans support going to war. People do feel that this is war, or war that is about to start.
And Michelle, you actually had to run away from that blast earlier today.
Yes, I did. I'll give you a very brief rundown. We saw the second tower collapsing. We were just a matter of blocks away. We ran for our lives. I took shelter in a garage. The cameraman, Paul Atkinson, kept running. We left some gear behind, and I can't tell you how terrifying it was.
Thanks, Michelle. Michelle Stone in New York.
Difficult times for Michelle. She's been reporting live for us for nearly 18 hours now after escaping with her life this morning. Almost the entire world is united tonight in its condemnation of this act of destruction. It's been widely blamed on billionaire terrorist bin Laden, who's been harboured by Afghanistan's notorious Taliban.
It's hard to imagine anyone celebrating the wholesale loss of life, but throughout the Middle East, they're dancing in the streets. Men, women and children screaming with delight at the thought of thousands of Westerners killed or trapped under massive piles of rubble. On the West Bank, they're handing out lollies. The attack, they say, is a sweet from Arab terrorist leader Osama bin Laden. But as America mourns, it's appealed for a united front against its invisible enemies.
We call upon the entire world to step up and help, because terrorism is a common enemy to all, and we're in this together. The United States has borne the brunt, but who can be next?
It's a message already understood by America's closest allies.
This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world today. It is perpetrated by fanatics who are utterly indifferent to the sanctity of human life. And we, the democracies of this world, are going to have to come together to fight it together and eradicate this evil completely from our world.
Today's events in the United States went beyond national boundaries. It was a brazen challenge to humanity, to all the civilized people.
Like the rest of us, the world's leaders have watched the shocking events unfold on television.
There can be no doubt that these attacks are deliberate acts of terrorism, carefully planned and coordinated, and as such, I condemn them utterly. Terrorism must be fought resolutely wherever it appears.
Those people are merciless, they are killers, they are cheaters, they are liars. They don't have any limitation.
The leaders of the Western world agree terrorists have opened fire on democracy.
This is a declaration of war against the entire civilized world. I want to tell Americans they have the solidarity of the French people, especially to the families of the victims. What happened in the United States concerns all of us.
Even old enemies are making a joint stand against the cowardly killers of innocent Americans.
At this most difficult hour, all Israelis stand as one with the American people. Our hearts are with you, and we are ready to provide any assistance at any time.
Terrible act. We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
Belgium holds the presidency of the European Union.
For what's happened today in the United States, it's are acts of barbarism.
The US government's been inundated with messages of support from Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak to Chinese Premier Jiang Zemin. The superpowers are united in their anger. There's even been an offer of medical and humanitarian aid from America's foe of almost 50 years, Fidel Castro, who says Cuba expresses
its most sincere condolences to the North American people for the painful and unjustifiable losses of human lives caused by these attacks.
Very few countries are taunting America in its moment of pain. Iraq's Saddam Hussein says the American cowboy is reaping the fruits of his crimes against humanity. But like Pearl Harbor in 1941, it would take a foolish nation to awaken a sleeping giant.
There's only one way to begin to deal with people like this, and that is you have to kill some of them, even if they are not immediately directly involved in this thing.
Vengeance is expected to be swift, but with a long-term purpose.
America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world. And we stand together to win the war against terrorism.
Sean Fewings, 10 News.
And Australia has activated its counter-terrorism plan. Key federal buildings and defence installations around the country are on heightened alert. Increased security is being provided for American, Israeli and Jewish properties.
2 a.m. and the first signs of the counter-terrorism plan being swung into action. The American embassy in Canberra is evacuated and an exclusion zone is thrown around it and the nearby Israeli embassy.
The level of alert over United States and Israeli assets and installations in Australia has been raised to the highest level that applies in a situation where there is no actual attack.
3 American naval vessels in Darwin Harbour yesterday slipped anchor before daybreak. At the Pine Gap Joint Facility near Alice Springs, nothing's left to chance. The realisation is somebody somewhere has declared war on the United States.
I was very pleased to hear the President say that this was an attack on freedom and freedom would be defended.
Soldiers in battle gear and face camouflage provided extra security at the RAF base in Canberra. The VIP squadron busy ferrying ministers to and from crisis meetings. Foreign Minister Alexander Downer says world politics will never be the same. An historic and frightening development has shaken any complacency.
That you can't be too cautious. Who would have thought 24 hours ago that the worst act of terrorism in history was going to be perpetrated on the United States?
Security was stepped up at Parliament House, Canberra, and other key federal buildings around the country.
We are not a target like the US is a target, but the lesson these days of international terrorism is that decent, open, democratic societies like ours are enormously vulnerable.
500 Commonwealth parliamentary delegates meeting in Canberra paused for a moment's silence in memory of the dead and issued a statement condemning the attacks as an atrocity against humanity. The bipartisan support for America extends beyond expressions of sympathy. Australia has promised to assist Washington in whatever military retaliation it may take against the perpetrators. In a statement, the US ambassador has expressed his nation's gratitude.
We have indicated that we will obviously play our role as an international citizen. We will assist in any way that we can.
Members of the Counter-Terrorism Committee monitored developments throughout the day. Paul Bongiorno, 10 News.
Our Prime Minister John Howard is bunkered down with his wife and son in Washington, still deciding when and, more importantly, how they'll come home. Information on Australian casualties is difficult to confirm, but the Prime Minister has warned us to prepare for the worst.
After seeing what first appeared to be a horrible accident, the Prime Minister and his official party were struck with the shocking realisation that the United States was under terrorist attack.
When you can see these pictures, it's obviously something devastating has happened.
A press conference originally organised to discuss the refugee crisis back home in Australia captured everyone's overwhelming disbelief.
It appears to be a most horrific, awful event that will obviously entail a very big loss of life.
What was your reaction when you saw those pictures?
Oh, dreadful. Just appalling. Awful.
But without warning, as the briefing continued, Washington was hit. The Pentagon building, just kilometres from the Prime Minister's hotel and a site he'd just visited yesterday, was struck by a large passenger plane and several other explosions. John Howard left the briefing to the sight of dense smoke billowing from what was considered one of the most secure buildings in the world. Panic quickly erupted on the streets outside. The area surrounding the Pentagon descended into complete chaos.
Keep walking down. We've got to clear the park.
The Prime Minister was quickly evacuated to the Australian Embassy 10 blocks away with his wife Jeanette, son Tim and complete official party. As helicopters swept the building, the US Secret Service stepped up security with semi-automatic weapons joining personal luggage inside. Digesting a situation impossible to comprehend, a visibly shaken John Howard read from a letter he sent to the US President.
Dear Mr President, the Australian Government and people share the sense of horror experienced by your nation at today's catastrophic events and the appalling loss of life. I feel the tragedy even more keenly being here in Washington at the moment. In the face of an attack of this magnitude, words are always inadequate in conveying sympathy and support. You can, however, be assured of Australia's resolute solidarity with the American people at this most tragic time. My personal thoughts and prayers are very much with those left bereaved by these despicable attacks upon the American people and the American nation.
The sheer disaster initially thought to be even worse for Australia than first expected, with news that the hijacked plane that slammed into the Pentagon was an American Airlines flight due to connect with Qantas and then fly to Australia. At this stage, no Australians are thought to be among the 58 people on board the plane travelling from Washington to Los Angeles.
It is the question, though, of whether there were any Australians on some of those flights. We have to prepare ourselves for that possibility.
The only good news, 2 Australian defence workers originally unaccounted for at the Pentagon have now been found. As a numb calm descends here on the streets of Washington, the Prime Minister is now reassessing how and when he'll come home. Events planned for the final 2 days of this official visit are obviously now cancelled. The entourage now on standby to leave at any time. Moved from the Australian Embassy, the Prime Minister is now using the Ambassador's residence as a safe house. In Washington, Deborah Knight, 10 News.
And the agonising wait for contact with relatives and friends possibly caught up in the US tragedy continues here at home. The Department of Foreign Affairs in Canberra has established a crisis hotline. Already 15,000 callers desperate for news of loved ones have registered. Missions in the US are liaising with local authorities and airlines to establish how many Australians are involved.
There are a number of Australians working in the World Trade Center. And it's possible that some Australians could have been on some of those aircraft.
The crisis hotline numbers to call are 1800 00 2214 and 1300 555 135.
Shockwaves from the US attacks have rocked the world's economies, sending them plunging. The Australian stock market also fell amid fears the disaster will hasten a global recession.
Virtually the moment this strike at the heart of American capitalism occurred, global stock markets began reacting. The Australian stock market dropped 90 points in the first 15 minutes of trade. It hovered between 3% and 4% down throughout the day.
The worst hit stocks generally has been the banking sector. The insurance companies have been lower, and some of the media stocks, such as News Corporation, has also come off substantially.
Gold and gold-related stocks fared better as safe havens in uncertain times. Energy stocks rose too, over concern oil prices will skyrocket. Wall Street shut down immediately and will remain closed tomorrow. It normally trades $50 billion a day. Stock markets from London to Europe and Asia all slumped between 5% and 9% on fears a global recession is now assured.
If business and consumer confidence continue to weaken and people do not spend, not invest, not employ, then we're going to see implications for the global economy.
While Australian companies are certain to be affected, the Treasurer was playing down the likely effects.
The US is a very, very large economy. It's something like 19 trillion Australian dollars. So let's keep things in perspective there.
Of all the Australian companies likely to be affected by this tragedy, one will be affected more than most. Shopping centre manager Westfield only recently secured a 99-year lease on the management of the retail areas within the World Trade Center. The deal cost the shopping centre giant $800 million. Its main concern now, though, for staff in the devastated buildings, one American employee remains unaccounted for. Westfield withdrew itself from early trading but assured the market it is insured for terrorist attacks. And that may now point to the long-term impact for American insurance companies, especially when previous attacks, like the World Trade Center bombing in the early 90s, are considered.
The total insurance bill was $510 million. Now we're looking at both buildings being disappeared, and we're probably talking in the trillions.
But for the moment, financial markets, like everyone else, are simply gripped by a scale of devastation too large to comprehend. Eddie Meyer, 10 News.
And looking at figures from the day's trading here in Australia, the share market sinking to a 14-month low, not unexpected, of course. The All Ordinary sliding 132 points. Shares were hit hard, nearly all finishing the day lower. NAB shedding $1.57, News Corp $1.60, the AMP down $1.28. The Australian dollar this evening worth 51.88 US cents, over 35 pence, under 62 yen and 57 euro cents. Gold is surging. It's a safe haven, of course, closing nearly $7 higher at 285 US dollars an ounce. We're talking to Michael Blythe at CommSec. Michael, I haven't got the final figures here. Roughly that 130 points, what percentage drop on the market is that?
That's pretty close to a 4% fall, Ron.
Now, Michael, compared to other international economies, that in fact is not too bad.
Yes, we may have seen, I think, some benefit from the fact that our economic outlook's a little bit better. Also possibly benefiting from some safe haven flows out of the US and elsewhere to what looked relatively attractive destinations like Australia and New Zealand today.
The ones that are taking the biggest hit, we're looking at NAB here, we've got News Corp. These are ones all with massive exposure to the American markets, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. The companies that we've seen particularly harshly treated today are those with that big offshore exposure. We've seen big drops in media stocks with the falls in News Corp, big falls in transport as Qantas was hammered, and also big falls in the insurance area where any company with a perceived exposure to that reinsurance risk resulting from the US have also been pretty harshly treated.
You now have had the day to analyse what's going on world markets. What is the immediate outlook for the world economy now that you've had time to consider this?
Well, the unprecedented nature and scale of the tragedy we're seeing in the US at the moment means we really are in uncharted territory. What we can say, though, is that when economies are weak, they're very susceptible to shocks. And we've seen that already today. We've seen the immediate dislocation coming through in the communications area, in financial markets, in transport, not just in the US but elsewhere. We're seeing perhaps some effect on business and consumer confidence. We're seeing lower share prices pulling back household wealth. That may see the consumer sit on their hand. Higher oil prices, well, we saw the impact that can have on growth last year. These are all new risks in the global outlook. They're all on the downside.
Thanks, Michael. Michael Blythe at CommSec.
It's the early hours of the morning in Washington where Deborah Knight joins us now live. Now, Deborah, are there any updates on John Howard's plans for leaving the country?
Well, Jessica, the plans are still unclear. The Prime Minister is horrified at what's occurred. Like everyone watching it around the world, he's trying to grasp the situation, but the fact that he's here, embroiled in it personally, it's hitting home even further for him. He arrived here in Washington as part of his United States trip on a commercial flight. There's not a government jet waiting here to ferry him back to Australia. So while the commercial airspace here in the United States is expected to open up around midday tomorrow, it's still not clear as to how the Prime Minister will return. It could be a United States military jet, it could be an Australian jet. We're still waiting detail on that, but he, his wife Jeanette, his son Tim and the official party are safe inside the Australian ambassador's residence here in Washington.
Now, can you tell us what's the mood like in the US Capitol at the moment?
I've never experienced a roller coaster ride like this in terms of emotions. It's moved beyond the intense shock, the immediate shock, to a sort of dull, numb feeling, really, and a feeling we don't really ever want to experience again, I must say. But every time we do see the new fresh pictures that are emerging of the event that's occurred, the stomach really does turn. I drove a few hours ago past the Pentagon building, and it is horrific. There's a gaping hole in the side of this building. It's seemingly impenetrable, the world's largest building. Fires are burning, and it's a frightening situation that's going on here in Washington right now.
Thanks, Deborah. Deborah Knight in Washington.
Of course, Australians are involved in this bizarre incident. A Brisbane man working inside the World Trade Center says it took him nearly an hour to escape the rubble. He's one of many Australians who witnessed the carnage firsthand.
Australian Adam Hopp was working on the 73rd floor when he heard a deafening roar followed by chilling screams.
I just assumed it was a bomb. And when you feel something like that, you can't know that it's a bomb, a missile, a plane crashing into you.
Like hundreds of his colleagues, the landscape architect fled to a stairwell.
It took us approximately 50 minutes to get down. And that's just, walking down the stairs and stopping for congestion because people are coming out from other floors.
Many of those people were seriously wounded. The 37-year-old says a strange calm then took hold, but once outside, he realised the magnitude of the devastation.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me.
It was carnage. It was a Steven Spielberg war movie around the base of the building. Everything was smoking. There was blood and body parts.
Victoria Police Assistant Commissioner Noel Perry fled his Manhattan hotel and watched both towers crumble from the Brooklyn Bridge.
People around me crying and screaming a little bit. Some people get a bit anxious, but fortunately common sense prevailed, and a lot of us just yelled out, stay calm, just walk.
Like thousands of visitors, Mr Perry is now stranded in New York, missing the safety and comfort of Australia like never before.
I intended to go back to go to the United Airlines office within the World Trade Center this morning at 8:30, but fortunately we slept in. Otherwise I might have been there myself.
Martine Griffiths, 10 News.
Australian travel agencies have been inundated with calls from frantic travellers. Many have had their holidays put on hold while others are stranded, desperate to get back home.
Cancellations and diversions have choked the world's airports. Flights in and out of the United States have been suspended and some incoming flights to Australia cancelled.
Heathrow at the moment is not accepting any flights from America, any flights that originated from America. They're diverting them to other countries.
Security has been stepped up at all Australian airports. In Sydney, passengers on the last flight from New York arrived in disbelief.
As you know, we all work in the trade area, and close friends probably have gone.
It's awful, sickening, it's just terrible. Can't believe it.
Australian Federal Police boarded the aircraft on touchdown. Passengers are now undergoing counselling. Among those on board, John Newcombe and pop star Britney Spears. Qantas and Air New Zealand cancelled American-bound flights. US swimmer Chad Carvin was due to fly from Brisbane to LA this morning.
Any attack against Americans hits home pretty hard. I'm going to fly to Auckland and then just kind of hang out there until I can catch a flight to LA.
Australian travel agencies have been inundated with callers.
All of the airports in both America and Canada have been shut down.
People have been cancelling travel plans or desperately trying to find ways to get home.
We've got two sets of thought. One is I just want to stay where I am and I won't get on a plane until I'm satisfied that the plane's safe. The other thought is get me home no matter what it costs, so long as I don't go anywhere near the States and I don't go on a US carrier.
Underwriters for travel insurance companies were today holding urgent talks trying to decide what to do with policies belonging to thousands of stranded customers. Most contracts have a clause which say travellers aren't covered during acts of terrorism. It's unclear when normal air services to America will be restored. Georgina Lewis, 10 News.
The time now in Sydney is 25 to 6. Can I just mention that our news this evening will continue right through until 6:30, so stay with us for all the latest information on these horrific events in the United States. Here in Sydney, of course, security is at peak level. The crackdown focusing heavily on the airport and the protection of American facilities.
Little is being left to chance. Sydney Airport under intense scrutiny, returning to the levels of last year's Olympic Games. Police sniffer dogs out in force, authorities checking baggage and lockers, leaving no stone unturned. All flights to the United States cancelled. Those on the last flight to Australia from New York emerging in tears, shocked and in disbelief.
I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a total joke. I just looked at the guy, our steward, and he's like, no, this is serious.
Oh, it's awful, sickening, it's just terrible.
Among those to have narrowly avoided the chaos, US Open winner Leighton Hewitt and tennis legend John Newcombe.
Stunned, and I guess they knew before we landed, but they didn't want to tell us until we'd landed because that could upset quite a few people, who were on the plane.
Also flying into Sydney, singer Britney Spears, visibly shaken by the news. Federal Police boarded QF 108 as soon as it touched down to brief passengers on the terrorist attacks. Some unable to contain themselves, others taken away to a private room for counselling.
We've already seen a high level of stress amongst the general community, and there'll be a support program for the general community as well.
But for those trying to get to North America, confusion reigns.
Hopefully there'll be an update by the end of the week. Hopefully in a couple of days maybe.
For those now faced with a massive and daunting rescue operation in New York, a show of support.
Seeing the firefighters out there just covered in the dirt and the rubble and not knowing where to start looking, and just my heart, I can picture myself in that situation, and you just feel lost. I mean, where do you start?
The flag at the steps of the consulate building becoming a shrine for Sydney-siders, and for those unable to be with colleagues, the pain unbearable. Authorities swung into action as soon as the carnage began last night. Sydney Police being placed on guard outside the US consulate, which has been locked down.
Well, we have a long-standing plan with the Commonwealth authorities. That was activated at about 11 o'clock last night. That means the Commonwealth and the state services working together. It means attention to obvious security locations.
In particular, American properties and military assets, including Navy ships in local ports at the heart of the crackdown. Naval bases like Garden Island moving to the more serious condition amber. That means the already thorough checking system has been intensified. The message is clear: no unauthorised entry is allowed. A close eye also being kept on the surrounding waterways. The Royal Australian Air Force Base at Richmond also in lockdown mode. The stock exchange was a ghost town for the most part, but trading continued, although most had things other than money-making on their minds. Others probably wishing that trading was suspended as markets went into a state of shock. Security in public buildings in the heart of the city also remain at levels not seen in years. Frank Coletta, 10 News.
There's simply no way of coming up with a death toll, but we can give you some idea of the number of people thought to have been in each of the areas involved. 10,000 people work in each of the World Trade Center towers hit. There's just no way of telling how many people were on the ground when they both came crashing down. Around 260 people were on board the 4 planes that crashed. 285 firefighters are thought to have lost their lives trying to rescue people from the World Trade Center towers as they collapsed. 65 police are also believed to have died doing the same thing. At the Pentagon, up to 800 people are feared dead. All these figures purely estimates, of course, but there's no denying a massive loss of life from these attacks.
President George W. Bush is vowing to hunt down those responsible for these terrorist acts. In an address to the nation, he says no distinction will be made between those responsible for the actual acts and those harbouring the terrorists.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America.
President George W. Bush in a worldwide address following those terror attacks overnight. We're going to go back live now to Deb Knight, who's in Washington. Deb, you've got some more information there on the security measures that are being taken.
Yes, Ron, Washington is in total emergency mode here. It's a state of play that this city, which if any city in the world would be able to cope with a terrorist attack, it is experiencing intense security. The White House itself, where the president is, there are snipers all over the building, all over the roof of the building. It's cordoned off. The streets surrounding key buildings here in Washington, like the Capitol building where I am tonight, security is tight. The streets are closed. And it's one of those nights where you just think, what is going to happen next? There are military vehicles roaming the streets with police as well, ambulance vehicles, sirens going off. And the United States administration is putting out the message, we have not been shut down. The Pentagon itself will reopen tomorrow. It's on fire at the moment, and apart from the west wing, the western area is on fire. And it's hard to imagine how people will carry on with work there tomorrow when it does reopen, but that's the message that the United States is sending out. Flags are half-mast around the city, the American flags obviously around the city in generous degree. And it's a really difficult. I've spoken to residents who live here, and they're in deep shock because it's a state of play they've never experienced.
Deb, you have touched on an important point there. The American executive government, is it operating out of the White House tonight, or has the president been evacuated to a safer location?
Well, that's unclear. We're hearing reports that he is in the White House and that there are moves to get in key cabinet members into the White House for a briefing tomorrow as well. There's also reports that he has moved out. I think it's a state of play where too much information is viewed as perhaps risking the security even further. But as we're aware, key buildings will be operating tomorrow, like the Pentagon. And at the moment, as you drive past it, there are firefighting trucks on the side where the fire is still going, and there's the ladders from the firefighting trucks just perched against the sections of the building that haven't collapsed, pumping water into there. And it's the fire, the fact it's still going is obviously really hampering rescue operations. And the numbers that Jessica mentioned before, I mean, 800 dead. In this building alone, a disaster on its own like this would just be difficult to comprehend.
Deb, I believe we have...
Comparing that with New York as well.
We have pictures. We may be able to show some of those now. The pictures... we don't, I'm sorry. The pictures that we have are very deceptive because, in fact, the Pentagon is the biggest single building in the world, I understand, but it is low level and built in such a way that it is a giant bunker. So the pictures we see are deceptive in that it doesn't look like there's a great deal of damage, but yet we have to imagine that a laden airliner has slammed into the side of that, slicing right through into the central courtyards. So the devastation there must be very considerable.
Yeah, it is amazing. You drive past, you're on a freeway and you're looking down upon the Pentagon building. It's not tall, you're right there. It is the world's largest office building, but it is enormous. It is phenomenal. And there is this gaping chunk, this gaping hole in the side of it. You can see straight into the office levels that have collapsed onto each other. There's office equipment teetering on the edge, about to contribute and become more rubble. It's devastating, it really is.
Yes, beyond imagination. Deb Knight, thank you. Deb Knight in Washington.
It's a long and anxious wait for relatives of possible Australian victims. A Surfers Paradise family fears the worst. They're frantically trying to track down a relative who worked in the World Trade Center.
Half a world away from New York's devastation, in a Gold Coast high-rise, a family watches the story unfold and waits for news of a loved one.
It's just pure shock, absolutely pure shock.
George Fiala last heard from his cousin Peter in an email describing his Manhattan workplace.
I have a very good position and the offices are located in downtown Manhattan in the Twin Towers. That is the World Trade Center.
Peter describes the amazing view.
To give you a better idea how high is this office, if you see a helicopter flying by, you have to look down.
Like many who worked in the World Trade Center, Peter Fiala was the best in his field, a nuclear scientist who fled his native Czechoslovakia for the freedom of the West. His elderly uncle now fearing the worst.
You can't. Never thought that a young man like him that would lose in so young age his life.
But the family refuses to give up hope. Since the early hours, they've been trying to contact relatives in the United States without success.
You just can't believe, I mean, you know, that you know someone so close and then suddenly they may not be there anymore.
John Flynn, 10 News.
There has been a tremendous outpouring of sympathy from Australians to our friends in America at this time of need. Special condolence books from tomorrow will be available, so you can express your sympathy for the victims of these terrorist attacks. Lord Mayor Frank Sartor says the books will be available outside Sydney Town Hall and also from Customs House at Circular Quay. They will be open and you can write your messages of sympathy in there from 8:30. Tomorrow morning. Throughout the day, flags in Sydney have been flying at half-mast. Mr Sartor says letters of sympathy have also been sent to the Mayor of New York and the Mayor of Washington.
There's extraordinary amateur video of the disaster in New York. Dr. Mark Heath was caught up in the midst of the chaos.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help. I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot? I'm just getting a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Who are you?
Oxygen. Don't have oxygen.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen. If someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks. Just to wait here at this semi-staging area, see if I can help. So that's what I'm doing. They won't let me go any closer. No one can go in to get the people out. There's small explosions still going on. So far, I just seen some people who needed oxygen from the dust. That was one trauma. Gonna go wash my eyes out. Yeah, that almost made it work. Looking north on the West Side Highway. You guys going in? Yeah. Come with you. You know, don't want to get too much closer because the more buildings could come down, then we're not going to help anybody.
All right.
I think we should. Yeah.
Where's the incident come out?
Let's just.
Oxygen.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just wait right here. Let's just station up right here. Okay.
All right, Doc.
Why don't we set up? Can you hang IVs from this pole here?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just heard another explosion. They're handing out gloves and masks. The consensus is it's too unsafe to go in there. Just gonna wait here until they bring some people out. I hooked up with some firemen with some first aid stuff. You know what?
Anything?
Why don't we just set this up as a little mobile hospital unit right here, okay? Any suggestions? Should we set up here for medical work? Think this is safe enough here?
Again, a reminder that our 5 o'clock news this evening is continuing right through until 6:30, so please stay with us for continuing Australian perspective of these terrible events. We are getting information starting to trickle through about possible Australian casualties. At least 13 Australians remain unaccounted for as fears mount that the terrorist attack in the United States may have claimed, almost certainly has claimed, thousands of lives. Prime Minister John Howard has warned the nation to brace for news of Australian casualties from the wave of overnight attacks. More than 10,000 Australians live and work in America's financial heart, and the Prime Minister says there's, of course, the possibility that some have been killed.
The head of the School of Aviation at a Queensland university was flying to Los Angeles when the captain broke the horrific news. Dr. Paul Bates from Griffith University describes the scene on board the flight as the passengers learned what was happening.
There was stunned silence, and a lot of people who were, I guess, US citizens tried to use the airphone in the aeroplane to call home to find out what was going on, and the airphones got cut off very soon after that. It was just very calm and quiet and silent, and I guess we didn't understand the seriousness of it until we were landing in Los Angeles, and we were told we were the only aircraft to be landing in Los Angeles airport.
Were you escorted from the plane?
The FBI agents came on a number of times because there were concerns about bombs in the Los Angeles airport, and the whole of the Los Angeles airport had been evacuated, and they escorted us off the plane, and there were dozens of heavily armed FBI agents.
What has been the reaction from US citizens, the ones that you have seen or spoken to?
There's I guess a disbelief that this could happen in this day and age, that people could actually hijack aircraft and get into the cockpit and fly those airplanes into very significant buildings.
Are people afraid, do you think?
It's difficult to say. I think there's such a feeling of unreality. I'm not sure that people are afraid. They're still in shock about the disbelief is probably a better description of it.
Are they looking to the President for guidance here?
American citizens certainly are, and that's certainly what's coming across on the CNN, that they're looking for guidance and looking for reassurance and wanting to make sure that other aircraft are safe. Well, there's something like 40 or 50,000 flights that have been cancelled today, and there's not going to be any movements at all until at least midday tomorrow, and potentially after that. America is at a standstill today. They've closed Disneyland and Disney World. A lot of the sorts of things that people in Australia think about America are all closed. America is effectively closed today.
What we have been able to do throughout the day is actually animate the fatal flight paths taken by the 4 planes involved in the overnight attacks in America. The first plane was a Boeing 767, American Airlines Flight 11. It left Boston at 7:45 a.m. local time, destination Los Angeles. Less than half an hour later, it slammed into the World Trade Center in New York. 92 people were on board. The second plane, United Airlines flight UA175, also a Boeing 767, left Boston at 7:58 a.m. local time. Destination again Los Angeles. An hour later it crashed into the World Trade Center. 65 people were on board. The third plane was a Boeing 757, American Airlines flight 77, left Washington at 10 minutes after 8 o'clock. Destination Los Angeles. It dived into the Pentagon in Washington less than an hour later. 64 people were on board. The fourth plane was another Boeing 757, United Airlines flight UA93. It left Newark at 1 minute after 8 o'clock. Destination San Francisco. It crashed southeast of Pittsburgh 2 hours later. 45 people were on board. That's a total of 226 people on board those 4 aeroplanes.
Now, with America still reeling from its worst terrorist attack, attention is now turning to who is responsible. Suspicion has immediately fallen on the world's most wanted man, Osama bin Laden, who's declared a holy war on the United States.
The Afghan capital, Kabul, pounded by a rocket assault, initially thought to be a retaliatory attack on the country that's been sheltering Osama bin Laden. But anti-Taliban forces have claimed responsibility. Just who is responsible for the devastating terrorist assault on the United States is the question now being asked. The world's attention is focusing on the 44-year-old Saudi dissident who's been hiding in Afghanistan. Considered one of the richest and possibly most ruthless terrorists in the world, bin Laden heads an international network of Islamic militants.
In 1998, he declared a jihad against the United States, which effectively put those groups in a confrontation situation, I suppose, with the US.
Because he has vowed vengeance against the United States. It's not so long since they were planning to attack the World Trade Center.
A former Israeli Prime Minister also says bin Laden is probably to blame.
Most probably bin Laden-like organization, but I cannot say that I'm sure of it. But anyhow, it's an attack against our whole civilization, not just against the Americans.
But Afghanistan's ruling Taliban militia, which has been providing a safe haven for bin Laden, has denied he's played any role in this latest terrorist attack.
Can you rule out any involvement by Osama bin Laden? No, up to now, no one has blamed or accused him formally.
While most of the world has watched in horror, the Arab quarter in Jerusalem is celebrating the massacre. The attacks that destroyed the World Trade Center have occurred as 4 followers of bin Laden await sentencing for the bombings of 2 US embassies in Africa that killed 224 people. Those terrorists are being held in the Metropolitan Correction Center in Lower Manhattan, just a short walk from where the Twin Towers once stood. The Islamic militant is also suspected of plotting last year's bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen, which killed 17 sailors. While bin Laden's links to terrorism are widely known, little of a personal nature has been documented. He was born in Saudi Arabia and left to fight the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. He tried to return to his homeland and work in the family construction business, but was expelled in 1991 because of his anti-government activities. Since then, he's been given safe haven by Afghanistan's ruling Taliban movement, and during his time in hiding, has called for a holy war against the United States. Loreen Deal, 10 News.
And now for some more on the crisis from an Australian point of view. And political editor Paul Bongiorno has the latest from Foreign Affairs on some Australian casualties.
That's right, Jessica. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has collated some facts about Australians in Manhattan and New York. They've established that 15,000 Australians are living and working in Manhattan. A number of relatives have rung today. In fact, 8,000 have registered names, addresses and details of Australians in New York. And after doing all their checks and sums, the department says that it cannot account for 50 Australians. Now, it doesn't know whether these Australians are dead or injured. And so there'll be more on that, I guess, as the hours and the days go by.
Now, Paul, there's a heightened state of counter-terrorism all around Australia. What does that involve?
Well, I checked with Acting Prime Minister Anderson's office a short while ago. They say that the counter-terrorism plan will stay in place. It involves extra security at key buildings around the nation. It involves federal and state agencies working in close cooperation, and of course it involves the military, as we saw in our earlier reports, also at a heightened level of operation. And that's going to be open-ended, and it's constantly being monitored.
Now, Paul, just confirming, you had said that 50 Australians were involved?
What the department has said, that 50 Australians in New York cannot be accounted for.
And now the Governor-General is attending a prayer service in Canberra at the moment.
That's right. There was an ecumenical prayer service at St Christopher's Cathedral with representatives of all the major Christian denominations, as well as Jewish and Buddhist representatives that gathered to pray and to express their sympathy and condolences for the victims in New York.
Thanks, Paul. Paul Bongiorno in Canberra. We'll cross back to you.
Just gone 6 o'clock, we are continuing our bulletin through until 6:30 this evening. Beefed up security for next month's Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. State and federal governments insisting the Brisbane meeting will go ahead.
Surrounded by tight security, this is how the leaders of 49 countries will travel from Brisbane Airport to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. The big question now, is it enough, and will CHOGM still go ahead next month?
I'm making it clear that Queensland is still prepared to host CHOGM because we are not going to be stood over by thugs and murderers.
The US crisis has prompted an emergency security summit of police, government and the CHOGM task force.
The matter of security in terms of Australia has not been altered.
No firm decision yet on beefing up CHOGM security. Instead, an assurance the option is there and always has been. Until now, militant student protesters were thought to be the biggest risk. On the streets of Brisbane, many are demanding CHOGM's cancellation.
I don't know that Brisbane's ready for the type of security problems we're likely to have. Bit scary.
Although no specific threat to Australia has been identified, the country is on high alert. Terrorism expert Dr Daryl Jarvis is urging a rethink on CHOGM, especially if British PM Tony Blair attends.
A postponement until this situation has been dealt with effectively would probably be the more judicious path to follow.
Any decision to delay or cancel CHOGM rests ultimately with the Prime Minister. He's still in the United States. His Deputy John Anderson and the Attorney-General stress at this stage the Commonwealth heads will meet in Brisbane.
I'm not aware of any uncertainty about CHOGM. The plans for CHOGM are continuing. The security arrangements for CHOGM have been being put in place for quite some time, and under the National Anti-Terrorist Plan, the arrangements for CHOGM have been and will continue to be tested.
If you let the terrorists win, then democracy loses.
Still unclear is whether the Queen's visit to Australia will go ahead. Authorities are speaking to Buckingham Palace about the Queen's plans to open the Commonwealth meeting. Darren Roberts, 10 News.
America's Day of Horror began just like any other. The streets of New York are bustling with business people and tourists. Here's how the catastrophic chain of events unfolded.
Tuesday morning, New York City. For the people of the Big Apple, a glorious start to the day. The grand twin towers of the World Trade Center piercing clear blue skies. Then, out of the blue, the unimaginable. It was 8:45 local time, 11:45 last night Eastern Time Australian, when a packed passenger plane slammed into the North Tower. Confusion and panic take hold, but no one was prepared for what was to happen next. 18 minutes later, 9:03 local time, a second plane is seen approaching the South Tower, the world watching in disbelief. America was under attack. Just as the magnitude of these terror attacks began to sink in, yet another hijacked plane was on a collision course. 9:40 a.m, the Pentagon, America's military hub, erupted into a fireball. Back in New York, people scrambled for their lives, disoriented, hysterical, unsure where to run. Survivors inside the Twin Towers tried to escape the infernos gutting the buildings. Most wouldn't make it. 9:50 a.m, the South Tower, the second attacked, crashes to the ground. Just 10 minutes later, 10 a.m. US time, another aircraft crashes, this time in Pennsylvania. No buildings are hit, the passenger jet slamming straight into the ground. There's no clear reason why. One theory, its pilot crashed his craft, unwilling to follow terrorist orders. Thousands dead, thousands injured, but still more were to lose their lives. Its partner obliterated, its foundations rocked, the North Tower collapses. It's 10:29, an hour and 45 minutes after that first attack. Shell-shocked but defiant, the US president vows to find those responsible.
The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
As night fell, that thick cloud of ash and dust that hung over New York all day was still visible, an eerie blanket glowing through the bright lights, rescue workers continuing their difficult, grim task. They call New York the city that never sleeps. Tonight, it was an entire nation.
Now we're going back to latest pictures of the rescue effort in downtown New York. Emergency rescue workers are continuing their search for a miracle. Early Wednesday morning, New York time, it's nearly 15 hours since the worst terrorist attack in US history. Battling darkness and mountains of debris, a fresh wave of emergency rescue personnel entered the wreckage about midnight, local time, hoping to find some trace of survivors in this once bustling area of Lower Manhattan. Reports of mobile phone calls made just a few hours ago from people trapped inside the rubble offered a glimmer of hope. 3 people, a man and 2 police officers, were rescued after making just such a call. Their story is that they first attempted to call the emergency operator in New York, but were unable to make that connection. The man then called his sister in Pennsylvania, who called 911 and was able to convey enough information about the whereabouts of the trio to actually effect their rescue. But as rescuers began the arduous task of sifting through the rubble, they weren't sure of what the new day might reveal. Rescuers are focusing their efforts on those 8 floors, using a walkway around the first level of the building in a bid to gain access to the floors above. Emergency rescuers using bulldozers and other heavy equipment have now begun digging through twisted steel, broken glass and other debris.
A man using a computer on board a United Airlines jumbo jet sparked a full-scale emergency this morning. The Sydney-bound plane was diverted to Brisbane amid fears the passenger was linked to the terrorist attack.
Brisbane's International Airport on full terrorist alert. A state of emergency thrown across the complex as United Airlines Flight 815 from Los Angeles, laden with passengers, touched down just before dawn. The alarm was raised after the flight crew feared a young man on board might have been trying to sabotage the plane's electronics using a personal computer.
It was a big computer. It wasn't a little laptop. It was a pretty good-sized computer.
There was a computer game being played with a plane on it, with the figure of a plane.
The jet was on its way to Sydney when diverted to Brisbane. The suspect's computer shut down.
One of the engineers or somebody from the flight crew came and took the power source from it.
Just minutes from touching down, passengers were suddenly moved towards the front of the plane, the pilot telling them not to panic. It landed safely, the passengers safe.
No one knew what was going on. I was scared. I mean, you know, I was just sitting there hoping that the plane will land, that we'll all get off safely.
There was a little panic, but everybody's okay.
Specialist police boarded the 747 parked at the northern end of the airport, sweeping it for bombs. The suspect, his father and another brother, all from Guatemala, taken to the Federal Police headquarters for questioning.
She agreed to accompany us to help our inquiries.
Everyone on board the plane was questioned by state and federal police. Each passenger was asked whether they'd seen anything suspicious during their stay in the US, their personal details taken.
They were just asking us how long we'd been in America, where we'd been, did we notice anything happening over there, anything suspicious.
The computer was checked by police experts and found to be harmless.
The false alarm centred on some activity surrounding a computer game.
The man and his family remain in Brisbane tonight facing further questioning. The plane was moved to the other end of the tarmac where it remains tonight awaiting a fresh flight crew. Tony Fabris, 10 News.
Our US Open tennis champion Lleyton Hewitt has returned to Adelaide, flying out from New York just a few hours before the hijacked aircraft crashed into the World Trade Center. The Aussie champion says he has mixed feelings about returning to the US, especially if he has to fly between cities for tournaments.
Just 2 days ago, Lleyton Hewitt was the king of the American sporting world. The 20-year-old's US Open win, the biggest news in the States. But the unthinkable terrorist attack has ensured his victory has been quickly forgotten in America. Lleyton returned to Adelaide this morning with his parents and girlfriend Kim Clijsters. He was met with tight security before facing the media.
Yeah, as soon as I heard, you leave you got a sick feeling in your stomach. It sort of throws everything into perspective, a little bit more. I think it's great that I won a few tennis matches and that, but there's a lot more larger than tennis matches, that's for sure. When you look at the bigger picture and life in general.
Hewitt flew out of New York just hours before the first of the hijacked aircraft hit the World Trade Center.
To think that I was at New York airport going to Los Angeles, like a few of those flights were, only probably 5 or 6 hours before those people.
He admits to being worried about flying in the US when he returns early next year.
There's going to be that added fear, I suppose, now a little bit. It sort of does hit home because we are travelling week in and week out. If this happened halfway through the US Open week, there could have been a lot of athletes, a lot of tennis professionals travelling on those flights going to LA, and it could have been them that got hijacked.
Lleyton Hewitt now has Davis Cup commitments here in Australia. He's glad to be back on home soil.
It's a place where I can put my feet up and relax.
Mark Adenall, 10 News.
CNN cameraman Tom Newshall describes what he saw and lived through in a devastated New York while taping the shocking images that are being beamed around the world.
When I started filming the Trade Center towers this morning, I thought I had woken up in a nightmare. The flames, all these people running, trying to get out of Manhattan already. Then the first tower collapsed. Then day turned to night. A man turned up covered in soot, still carrying his briefcase. People were crying. Some just stood not knowing where to go. I kept thinking about my family, my colleagues, whether they were all right, whether I would see them again. It felt like the end of the world. Then I looked and the second tower collapsed. It was gone. It looked like an exodus. People were coming out of nowhere covered in towels. A barman closed his bar in front of us. Today there would be no business as usual, although somebody started to clean his fire escape around Wall Street. After we saw this woman call her family, we called ours too to let them know we were okay. People stopped to tell us what they saw.
People were running their hair on fire. People were jumping out of the World Trade Center. Jumping out because they don't know what to do. So, I mean, they're dead by doing that.
This man was taking this boy away from the scene.
His classmates, their parents work in the big building.
This couple was reunited and fine. We were invited into a hotel on Wall Street which was serving food in a makeshift room. We met the lucky ones too. This man overslept and he didn't get to work on time. He worked on the 78th floor of the World Trade Center.
From what I understand, my whole office is dead. Everybody died up there, jumped out or burned.
When we got to Wall Street, the stock exchange was closed. The police were blocking our way. We found a policeman 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center who was guarding a piece of one of the planes. He was waiting for a forensic team to come and pick it up. I felt the nightmare was just carrying on. When we got closer to the World Trade Center, policemen were getting more and more nervous. Then we finally saw it, through the smoke. The remains of the World Trade Center looked like a broken fence. It felt like covering a volcano eruption, dust everywhere, inches thick, pieces of paper covering the ground from the buildings. Again, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Broadway. It felt like a very bad horror movie. On the way back to the office on the empty highway uptown, I thought about all this senselessness, about these terrible acts. and about the freedom to do evil.
We've also just got in a clearer explanation of why these World Trade Center towers simply collapsed after being struck by the passenger jets. Experts both here and overseas believe the intense fires fed by thousands of litres of jet fuel caused most of the destruction. Temperatures in the skyscrapers estimated at more than 1,500 degrees, causing the external walls to buckle, allowing the floors above to simply fall straight through. A professor from Monash University believes no high-rise buildings in Australia could possibly have withstood those forces.
Sydney's Muslim community has held prayer vigils for the victims. The community remains worried it will be wrongly targeted by those who blame Islamic extremists for the horrific attacks.
This afternoon's prayer vigil is proof, if anyone needed it, that the mass terrorism has sickened people from all backgrounds. Australian Muslims wanted the wider community to seek their sympathy for the victims of the senseless killing.
Our feeling of sore sadness for victims of this horrific human tragedy.
The community doesn't want to become a victim itself. They don't want the misdirected anger of people who believe Muslim extremists might be connected to the attacks.
Our fellow Australians are mature enough not to draw any links whatsoever. We want to work together to do something positive and constructive for the families of the victims, and that should be the concerns of all decent Australians.
Australia's Muslim community reacted quickly to the attack by organising the prayer vigil. They're also worried that a recent increase in hate mail and threats directed against them will escalate now. Earlier, senior police met community leaders on the issue, warning them to lock up the mosque and to report any more threats to the police. More prayers for the victims are planned in the coming days.
It's indeed a tragedy that had led to the loss of lives of so many innocent men and women, and feelings are and sympathies are completely with the victims and their families.
Kevin Wild, 10 News.
We are going to move away briefly in this bulletin, which continues through until 6:30. Then we'll return to live CNN coverage. We're going to move away for a moment to other local news, but we will certainly be back with the terrorist information coming out of the United States shortly. Ansett has been dealt a massive blow. The stricken airline facing liquidation after Qantas ruled out a takeover. Angry workers have locked down several Ansett sites around the country, refusing to release aircraft after the federal government rejected a taxpayer-funded bailout.
Confusion and disillusionment for Ansett workers, leaving with their belongings from Melbourne's head office within an hour of Qantas ruling out a rescue package.
We love our jobs, we serve the public with a passion, and Air New Zealand have come and ripped us all apart, and now they're just chewing us up and throwing us out.
We don't really know what's happening yet, so...
Qantas issued a press statement this afternoon declaring Ansett's problems are far too great for Qantas to take on. Thousands of casual staff have been sacked this afternoon, other stunned workers walking off the job. Reports are now surfacing of flight attendants refusing to board aircraft amid speculation this week's wages won't be paid. With Ansett losing more than $1 million a day, its owner Air New Zealand has called on the Howard government to underwrite the crippled airline to keep it flying.
We've just been advised that the Australian government does not favour this proposal, and we're now discussing with them a further option which has become available during the day.
If it is going to die, that is a corpse that will lie at the feet of John Howard and John Anderson's policy ineptitude. Air New Zealand says it's now talking to other potential buyers, among them the Ansett Pilots Association, mounting a staff bid to take over the company.
We're a fine airline, we're a fine quality airline.
Public rallies supporting Ansett staff will be held this Friday. Stephanie Taylor, 10 News.
A man was shot in his lower legs near a pool in North Sydney this afternoon. Witnesses say they heard gunshots and then saw a man running away under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The injured man chasing after him before collapsing.
Didn't think I'd witness this the day after what happened in the US, but yeah, we went down to him and noticed he was bleeding and they had a gunshot wound and called the police.
The man, aged between 25 and 30, was treated at the scene by ambulance officers and then rushed to hospital. Investigations into the shooting are continuing.
The federal government has begun its challenge to a judge's order to bring the Tampa asylum seekers back to Australia. The boat people aboard HMAS Manoora continue their journey tonight to Nauru, despite yesterday's federal court ruling that they had been illegally detained.
What do people think we've got a defence force for if we've got the Australian courts telling us that we're not allowed to use them to defend the country?
After a brief procedural hearing today, the appeal has been listed for tomorrow. The court has already imposed a deadline of late Friday to return the asylum seekers.
The Treasurer is still upbeat about the economy, even though growth is lower than the budget predicted. The economy grew just 0.9% during the June quarter, coming in at a yearly average of 1.9%.
The Australian economy continues to grow strongly, notwithstanding a world slowdown.
But the opposition says the first year of the GST has produced the worst annual result in 10 years.
And in sports news this evening, Ricky Stuart is still completing negotiations to take over as coach of the Sydney Roosters. At Penrith, long-serving Panthers coach Royce Simmons is looking for a new challenge after being sacked.
Penrith Rugby League team has been Royce Simmons' life for the last 20 years. Firstly as a player, then as a coach. Now, as he reflects, his involvement is over.
I was expecting it, for probably 5 or 6 weeks now from, when it all blew up and back then. And, I think I went through most of the disappointment back then and the hurt and so on, but still comes a bit of a shock, and I had to get on my own for a while. And
Simmons played in Penrith's only premiership-winning team in 1991. He took over as coach in 1994. He's hurt at how his demise took place.
A couple of players in particular that haven't supported me, and them couple of players, I think I've supported them very well throughout my time. In fact, went out of my way to help them in a lot of different areas.
Already the candidates for his job are lining up. Among them, Sharks coach John Lang, former player John Cartwright, John Mooney, who won with Parramatta, Craig Bellamy now at the Broncos, Graham Murray, dumped by the Roosters, and favourite son Greg Alexander. While Royce Simmons' coaching career in the NRL is over for now, for former international Ricky Stuart, it's about to start. Negotiations should be completed by tomorrow for him to take over the Sydney Roosters. And Brisbane have refuted claims that veteran 5'8" Kevin Walters will make a surprise appearance in Saturday night's sudden death final against the Dragons.
Well, no, he's not playing, so that's the end of that.
Walters fractured an eye socket against the Dragons last month. Tony Peters, 10 News.
We understand one of the biggest difficulties in dealing with the terrorist situation in the United States at the moment is blood supplies to treat the thousands of people who have been injured in the terrorist attacks. And there is a way you can help with this. We are, in fact, exporting blood over there as quickly as possible. In fact, there has been an overwhelming response, apparently, from the Australian community to the blood banks around the country. Can we give you this information? If you are in a position to donate blood, and they need an awful lot of it in the United States at the moment, the City Blood Bank at 153 Clarence Street in Sydney will be extended its operating hours tomorrow. That's Thursday. They'll be open from 7:30 in the morning until 7 p.m. at night. All you have to do is turn up, but if you want some information about where to go and what to do, we also have a phone number for you, 13 14 95. It's on your screen there, 13 14 95. Your blood is needed.
The US has been the target of many terrorist attacks and survived several disasters. But commentators say there's been nothing like this since the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941.
Like the day President John F. Kennedy was murdered in 1963, everyone will remember for the rest of their lives exactly where they were and what they were doing when they heard the terrible news. The Kennedy assassination was shocking and horrible, like the attempt on President Reagan's life in 1981. But it was easy to see those as isolated attacks by deranged individuals, tragedies, not threats. 1986, the Challenger disaster, a terrible accident, grief, dismay, but no sense of threat. 1983, the bombing of the U.S. Marine barracks in Lebanon, clearly the work of terrorists, like last year's bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen, and the 1998 bombings at the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, and the attack on Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia. Americans were targeted, but not on American soil. 1988, the sense of threat intensified after the terrorist bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland. American civilians were killed on a civilian aircraft, but overseas. 1996, TWA Flight 800 crashed just off U.S. shores, but no terrorist attack was ever proved. A closer comparison, the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993, now, sadly, to become known as the first bombing of the World Trade Center. A terrorist attack on American soil, killing American civilians, with the terrorists eventually brought to justice. And of course, the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, where the real shock was that it was not an attack by overseas terrorists. The threat came from within. In the 1990s, for the first time, terrorism struck home. After Oklahoma City, over 90% of Americans believed that similar attacks of violence would occur again, but not where they lived and worked. Most Americans did not feel personally threatened by terrorist attacks, and most said they saw no reason to change any aspect of their personal life or activities to reduce the threat of terrorism. For the closest comparison to September 11th, 2001, you have to go back almost 60 years to December 7th, 1941.
A date which will live in infamy.
Pearl Harbor, a sneak attack on American soil by an overseas power. But Pearl Harbor was not an attack on Washington or New York, the capitals of government and finance, or an attack on civilian air traffic. Pearl Harbor was an attack on U.S. military forces, not American civilians, with fewer fatalities, and it happened while the rest of the world was at war. One day after Pearl Harbor, an outraged U.S. went to war. A lot of Americans may want to go to war now, but with whom? Bill Schneider, CNN, Washington.
Just before we wind up this extended bulletin of the 5 o'clock news, to let you know what we're doing this evening, as soon as we finish at 6:30, we're going back live to CNN. That will take us through to 7 o'clock. Then we will resume our normal programming. This evening's episode of Neighbours will in fact be shown tomorrow night. Before we go, the latest facts and figures of events unfolding in the United States as a shocked nation demands revenge. Who is the mastermind on this black day in world history? The fingers being pointed at Osama bin Laden, the Saudi terrorist. A search for survivors goes on tonight. The death toll is expected to be in the thousands. 20,000 people worked in the Twin Towers alone. Hundreds are dead at the Pentagon. Hundreds of firefighters and police are buried in the rubble. Trapped victims have been making desperate phone calls on their mobiles for help. Money markets are reeling tonight, shares plunging around the world, the price of oil and gold threatening to get out of control. And there's an urgent plea for blood, as we've mentioned earlier, from hospital staff in New York and Washington. If you can donate blood, it's being shipped over there from Sydney. Thank you. A check of the weather before we go. Around the city, Richmond today 17 degrees, 18 across the rest of the city. Present conditions, humidity 52%, winds are westerly, the air pressure 1,008. Cloud and thundery showers get dragged to the east coast by a low over New South Wales. Only light showers amongst the cloud elsewhere in the southeast. Cloud and showers spreading over the southwest. Cloud spreads over the northwest again, but it will bring only light rain. The forecast for the major cities tomorrow: Cairns mostly sunny 28, Brisbane mostly sunny, Sydney showers and 20 degrees, Canberra mostly sunny, Melbourne drizzle clearing, Hobart mostly sunny, Adelaide a late shower, Perth mostly cloudy, Darwin hazy and the Alice mostly cloudy. Around the Sydney area tomorrow, temperatures: Gosford 19 to 20 degrees across the Sydney region and 15 degrees in Katoomba. A few more showers overnight and tomorrow morning, becoming sparse later tomorrow. Southwesterly winds turning southerly and easing as the low drifts off the coast. Another mild night and day ahead. Temperatures ranging from 12 through to 20 degrees. The further outlook: Thursday showers and 20 degrees. Friday possible shower. Saturday mostly sunny. Sunday mostly sunny as well. A good weekend in store. Monday possible showers and then returning to mostly sunny conditions for the beginning of the week.
Some important numbers now for people worried about family and friends in the United States. The Department of Foreign Affairs hotlines are 1800 002 214 and 1300 555 135. The New South Wales Health Department has a counselling helpline. That number is 1800 883 222, 1800 883 222.
Well, what a 24 hours it's been. That is the 5 o'clock news. Please stay with us for extended bulletins around the clock. I'm Ron Wilson.
And I'm Jessica Rowe. We'll keep you up to date with developments from the United States all night. Sandra Sully will have an early edition of the late news at the special time of 9:30 and another edition at 11:30. Good night.
Good night.
This type of unprecedented action here in the United States, we're just not clear what kind of impact this will have on consumer confidence at a very fragile time. We'll have to wait some days before that is evident. We will not have stocks trading in the U.S. tomorrow. We also understand that Instinet is not trading U.S. stocks in Europe until we're able to come out of this. One of the big focuses when we are up and running again, of course, will be the insurers, as is often the case here with so much damage and loss of life. There are two areas really of insurance that are going to be covered, which is liability and property. And some of the last time, you know, it's eerie. We have been through this before at the World Trade Center. Many of the people coming out saying this is round two for them, and hopefully the last time out, insurers paid $510 million in damages in the wake of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. They're a big focus. I know that they're suffering losses abroad in both Asia and Europe in terms of insurers. Some of the companies last time that were affected: American International, Hartford Services, Cigna, which sold its U.S. property insurance to the Bermuda insurer ACE, and Lloyd's of London. Of course, we do not know if they are the companies that will again be facing liabilities on this side. We have had a statement from Chubb already, but we are going to have to wait until we can sift through them. You know, as I said, a lot of these companies at least have some satellite offices, even if they're not these insurance companies. Others that are involved in life have satellite companies down there. We understand that Paul O'Neill, the Treasury Secretary, is making his way back to the U.S. Obviously, as Richard mentioned, the Fed has come out and said they will provide the liquidity needed to keep the markets moving. So still a sense of shock here, but hopefully things will slowly get back to business. I also should mention that a lot of employers will keep their people home tomorrow and not bring them into Manhattan. So we're going to slowly grind forward here. Liz? Actually, I think we're going to Jonathan Mann, perhaps. Jonathan?
Maggie Lake, thanks very much. There is enormous uncertainty now. The money is one thing, but the center of everyone's concern, of course, the people. It could be weeks before the fate of all those who were in or near the World Trade Center is known. Michael Holmes has more.
Move it! Come on!
Even in the chaos of the aftermath, it was clear the casualty list would be obscenely long.
You don't want to know. You don't want to know. You don't want to know the things that we were stepping over. It was horrific, absolutely horrific.
Survivors, the walking wounded, and those who were just passing by the World Trade Center, ghost-like, covered in dust and ash and disbelief.
If you go over by there, you can see the people jumping out the window. They're jumping out the window right now. Oh, my God.
Everybody was on top of each other trying to come down, and then somebody finally calmed the crowd down to get them to come down the stairs in an orderly fashion and get them out of the building.
The dust was everywhere, blanketing entire city blocks, an eerie war zone scene, stunned survivors being guided to buses or simply walking silently away from the scene. Emergency workers did their job.
Why don't we just set this up as a little mobile hospital unit right here, okay? Okay.
Witnesses spoke of how eerily calm the survivors, even the injured, appeared to be. People ran, but there was little hysteria. The buildings housed thousands of workers. Thousands more visited each day. It will be days, maybe weeks, before the number of dead is known. It could be in the thousands. It all depends on how many of those 10,000 workers managed to evacuate before the buildings collapsed. The injured are easier to count, and they too number in the thousands. There are 170 hospitals in the New York area, and all were on maximum alert, many swamped with casualties. Injuries ranging from shock and asthma attacks brought on by that dust, through to broken bones and severe head injuries. And then there were the burns. Hundreds of people burned from head to toe, said one doctor. Here, another on what he saw.
There was one, a burn patient. I mean, it's very difficult to see burn patients. They're charred. They're charred. Their skin is coming off. They're in tremendous pain, and you know, it's tremendous suffering.
Officials were worried about blood supplies, but as soon as that became known, hundreds of New Yorkers lined up to donate, as did Americans across the country, jamming donation centres. Disaster relief agencies working with the military to transport thousands of pints of blood to New York City and to Washington, where survivors of the Pentagon attack were also in need. Among the dead and injured in New York, hundreds of firefighters, rescue workers, police officers, people who'd gone to the scene after the first plane crashed into the Twin Towers to help the injured and evacuate the survivors. They were inside when the buildings collapsed. And at last count, more than half of the 400 firefighters who went to the scene never reported back. Michael Holmes, CNN.
Assuming they got any sleep overnight, Americans will be waking up this day to headlines that will probably still seem very unreal. In some ways, this might be seen as the day the 21st century really began for the American people. Back now to New York, and once again, our Garrick Utley.
Well, really, it's talking or speaking of headlines, we've just got the first edition of one New York newspaper. It's the New York Post. As you can see here, act of war is on the front page. Get it right there. World Trade Center bombed, and there's the picture, the still photo of that one plane heading into one of the World Trade Center towers. We're still waiting for the New York Daily News and the New York Times. They're having trouble getting their papers in, as the Post did, from across the rivers where the printing plants are located, because the bridges and the tunnels have been closed. Today we see many of these images, and yet things that were not captured on videotape can also be very telling and very important. For example, early this evening I experienced two or three things. The skies were quiet over Manhattan after the explosions occurred, because air traffic, of course, had been grounded. Until about 7 o'clock this evening, and suddenly I was outside and I heard a noise, a strange noise. It was a U.S. Air Force fighter plane flying over Manhattan. One fighter, rather high, streaking across this city. Never heard that before here. A few minutes later, trying to get transportation. There are no taxis in town, very few buses or subways running. At the edge of Central Park, where tourists love to come, there was one of those horse-drawn carriages, the hansom cabs. Just one, a horse, the carriage, and its rider, its driver, looking for fares, alone in an empty street at Central Park South. But there were no customers out on the streets this evening. Finally, you find a bus, get on a New York City bus, and guess what? No charge. Everybody rides free these days and these nights in Manhattan. Those are some of the little things that aren't recorded on videotape, and here now are some of the pictures we've really been seeing over these past several hours. Let's go to them once again. We saw this extraordinary sight, the Exodus. We really can't call it anything more than that. People leaving Manhattan this afternoon. Maybe you've seen these scenes before. In lower Manhattan, the Brooklyn Bridge, famous to so many people. Just look at that. And look how orderly everyone is. Concern, anxiety, certainly, but order. No panic here. Amazing in view of what had just happened a few minutes before, after the planes struck the building. It comes down. Only 30, 31 years old, the World Trade Center towers, and down they came. Down they came after the fire in the towers reached 1,500 or 1,600 degrees or even more. That melted the steel. As it melted the steel, shell or frame, the floors collapsed, each on the other, and down they came into rubble. And amid this, the chaos, understandable chaos, confusion, fear, fleeing, the pure, basic human instinct of self-preservation. And yet, even in these scenes, again and again, the reports of how many individuals helped each other, helped pull them along, their friends, their colleagues. And tonight, the rescue efforts continue. Heavy machinery as well as floodlights, runoff portable generators have been brought in. There are up to 10,000 rescue workers in Manhattan, working day and night. Still no estimates as to what the casualties will be in the World Trade Center bombings, but the work continues. It has only begun. Which also raises another question, a question that New Yorkers will be asking as they get up this morning, and perhaps people across the nation will be asking too. Was this it? Is it now over? As horrendous as it was the taking down of the two towers here, the bombing of the Pentagon, the bombing of the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, is that the end of this terrorist attack by whomever organized it? Or could there be more attacks? We don't know. We don't want to raise any undue concern. But the fact that New York City security officials and federal security officials are saying keep the bridges and the tunnels closed tomorrow, keep the airports closed, keep the planes grounded, means they are obviously very concerned that there may still be another attack out there, some terrorist out there. Earlier this evening, bomb squads could be seen racing through the city, checking out every suspicious vehicle. They don't know, the security people, we don't know. And of course, we'll never know until it happens again if it does. Ralitza?
Garrick, certainly there is a massive loss of a sense of security that Americans will have after this event.
Certainly, there's no question about this. This is, as has been said many times today, the single most traumatic direct attack on American territory and lives since December 7th, 1941. And this too will be a day that will last much for many, many years in infamy. And yet, I think Americans are not totally surprised by this. Shocked, yes. Surprised, no. We understand the world today. We understand the dangers. We see what happens in the Middle East. We understand the terrorists in Afghanistan and elsewhere in this world. We see it via satellite all the time. We see it in the news. And so this scene is a reminder that, yes, it could happen again. It is, as somebody also observed, looking at these documents, these memos, these expense accounts, the letters that floated down from the World Trade Center towers. Whatever the high-tech age has brought us, we are not yet a paperless society.
Garrick.
So much invested in those papers and those lives and in those jobs. Yes, Ralitza.
Garrick, thank you very much.
Back to you.
Many nations around the world are more familiar with terrorism than the United States had been, but still the reaction elsewhere has been enormous shock. CNN's Christiane Amanpour joins us from London. Christiane?
Jonathan, indeed, the day after, the sense of shock and naked fear is growing, not diminishing. Here, the normally staid British newspapers, the broadsheets, are using headlines like Doomsday America. The cerebral Financial Times has got a massive front page which says assault on America. And even the Figaro in France saying the new war. The sense here is that this is an act of unparalleled barbarism. It is not just the biggest single act of terrorism on US soil, but according to everybody I've asked, this is the single biggest recorded act of terrorism in our memory. We can't think of anywhere that something like this has happened, as far as we can see, way back even in 50 years. The British Cabinet is meeting in emergency security session today. The Prime Minister has gathered his Home Secretary, otherwise known as the Interior Minister, his Foreign and Defence Secretaries. They have issued statements, certainly last night, the British Prime Minister saying that all democracies and all the world must now unite, not only to defeat, but to eradicate this act of barbarism and these kinds of movements that create this kind of upheaval and disaster and calamity. The French President Jacques Chirac called this an attack on freedom itself. The German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder called it an attack on the entire civilized world. Presidents across Europe, from Russia to Italy to France to Germany, are all saying that the world, the democracies, must stand firm, not only offering moral support and sympathy to the United States, but a new resolve to combat this kind of naked aggression, they're saying. In the Arab world, all the moderate Arab leaders, most of whom are allies of the United States, have condemned this. Even Libya Libya, which has its history of antagonism with the United States, has condemned this attack and has sent sympathy to the United States. The only country not doing so is Iraq, which, as we know, is in current state of ongoing war with the United States and, in fact, the United Kingdom. Here in Britain, there has been heightened security, not only at the airports where I flew in today, where there are policemen with submachine guns at the entrances to the airport. There are no planes allowed to fly over central London, but also in other areas of government buildings, there is a heightened state of alert, as there are in many other capitals. It is increasingly jittery. We've heard stories and reports of hoaxes, fake bomb alerts, people being told they had to evacuate a building in Frankfurt only to discover that this, in fact, was not a real attack. And indeed, Downing Street, the Prime Minister's residence here in Britain, was evacuated of all the journalists shortly before their national security meeting, and no reason was given for that. But a state of shock settling in here and around the world, Jonathan.
Christian Amanpour, thanks very much. Relitza?
Now, for more in the mood in Paris, we're joined by Jim Bitterman. Jim.
Yes, Relitza, good morning. The news here has been dominated, of course, by the attack this morning. One of France's leading commentators said that we are entering a new world here this morning, a world which will be dominated between the conflict, will be dominated by the conflict between radical Islam and the West. And he said that September 11th will mark a pivotal date between the before and after that conflict. Afterwards, of course, there was swift reaction on the streets here in Paris.
Within hours of the attack in New York, the American embassy in Paris was closed and evacuated. The employees told to go home. It remains closed this morning, and there's no sign of when it might open again. At American institutions around town, there is much tighter security this morning. Most remain open. But American flags have been withdrawn from outside the buildings in case anyone should want to try another attack. At the American Cathedral, a service is scheduled for later on today.
Sont une épouvantable tragédie.
President Jacques Chirac went on television last night to call the American attacks a terrible tragedy. And he ordered a top security alert, which will mobilize thousands of French troops and put them on the streets of Paris. But so far this morning, there is little sign of any military activity, and it's not clear that there has been any specific threat to the country. Nonetheless, French on the street this morning were nervous about what happened in New York and feeling very vulnerable, even here.
Oh, we don't feel in security nowhere now.
You don't feel secure anywhere?
Nobody is safe in his own country, and this is awful, I think.
There's a special meeting of France's anti-terrorism committee going on right now. Once again, the Interior Minister has emphasized that there is no specific threat against France. One leading newspaper here, as many have, compared the attack in New York to Pearl Harbor, but it took it one step further, saying that, like the attack on Pearl Harbor, perhaps the attack on New York will bring the United States out of its isolationism. Relitza?
Jim, what kind of offers for help to the U.S. are being contemplated?
The French help in this situation. I think they have sent some special teams to help look for victims in the rubble. But basically, there's not a whole lot they can do from here. They have canceled, by the way, I should have probably mentioned, they've canceled all further Air France flights today to the United States, just as a precautionary measure. So we're seeing that kind of global shutdown of the airlines that we saw yesterday afternoon. It looks like it's going to take place at least through part of the day today. Relitza?
Jim, thank you. John?
Beyond France, the European Union as a whole is trying to make its voice and concern known. Diana Muriel joins us now with the latest from a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels. Diana?
That's right, John. In fact, there's a series of emergency meetings taking place here in Brussels. Right now, the European Commission is holding an emergency session. We'll be hearing more from them in a press conference in approximately an hour and a quarter, where Romano Prodi, the head of the European Commission, is likely to make some remarks, as well as Chris Patton, who's the Commissioner for External Relations. As you said, the European Union foreign ministers will also be holding a meeting this afternoon here in Brussels, and we'll be hearing more from them later. And NATO, which has cancelled a meeting in Budapest, the chiefs of NATO returning to Brussels, they'll be holding their own meeting later, and again a press conference. In fact, the Permanent Security Council of NATO is currently in its second meeting of the day, in coordination with the US authorities, coordinating security measures here in Europe. At the same time, the response here in Brussels is one of absolute shock. In fact, the Belgian authorities have provided a team of 5 medical officers who are specialists in burns from the burns unit of the major hospital here in Brussels. We understand that they will be sent to America in response to American requests for assistance, as well as 5 police officers from the federal police here who are specialists in identifying corpses. The airport in Brussels is at a state of high security. There is a lot of disruption to flights around the region. Of course, there are no flights to the US, to Canada, or indeed to Israel today. But the security measures will continue until further notice. We understand that no flights will be going to the US until approximately midday Washington time. But of course, that has to be confirmed. Back to you, John.
Diana Muriel, thanks very much.
And it has been an unbelievable and tragic 21 hours here in the United States today. Here are now some of the most enduring images that were caught on camera.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
The plane was coming in. I noticed it a second before it hit the building. It looked like it was moving slowly, and it lined itself up to hit the building directly.
The doorman goes to me, wow, I never seen a plane flying so low. And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even real.
I'd say the whole takes about, looks like 6, 7 floors were taken out. And there's more explosions right now. Hold on, people are running.
Hold on just a moment. We got an explosion inside.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on.
It just went ba-boom. It was like a bomb went off. And it was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, they were coming out on the mezzanine level there, and another explosion came right from it, just everything went flying right in front of me. Everything just went boom.
There's a huge crowd, I'd say about hundreds of people on the streets that come from south to north. I've been really thousands of people that have been running from inside these buildings. You know, it's a very heavily trafficked area in downtown, the World Trade Center. Many of them were inside the building when they felt the explosion. And they say there was just pandemonium. There was no warning, no alarms, no anything. Everyone just raced from their desks.
There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Move it! Come on!
They started slowly evacuating the White House about 30 minutes ago, and then in the last 5 minutes, people have come running out of the White House and the old Executive Office building.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
Well, arriving at the Pentagon a short time ago, there was a huge plume of smoke which continues to rise from the west side of the Pentagon. The plume of smoke is enormous. It's a couple of 100 yards across. At its base, it is billowing into the sky.
There is a lot of confusion here at the Pentagon. It appears that something hit the Pentagon on the outside of the 5th corridor on the Army corridor. Several Army officers I talked to reported hearing a big explosion, seeing shards of metal coming past their window. The Pentagon has been evacuated. Emergency services personnel were rushing to reports of several people trapped in the building. Most of the building's 24,000 people are outside of the building or in the center courtyard.
The White House is reporting that the Capitol building has been evacuated and the Treasury Department has been evacuated. Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, is exceptionally tense and clearly taking steps as if it is virtually under siege here.
There has just been a huge explosion. We can see a billowing smoke rising, and I'll tell you that I can't see that second tower, but there was a cascade of sparks and fire, and now it looks almost like a mushroom cloud explosion, this huge billowing smoke in the second tower.
I hope I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help. Because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot? I'm just getting a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Oh, wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you?
Don't have oxygen.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks. They told me just to wait here at this semi-staging area. See if I can help, so that's what I'm doing. They won't let me go any closer. No one can go in to get the people out. There's small explosions still going on. So far, I've just seen some people who needed oxygen from the dust. That was one trauma. Gonna go wash my eyes out. Did we just heard another explosion? They're handing out gloves and masks. The consensus is it's too unsafe to go in there.
What are we
You know what? Why don't we just set this up as a little mobile hospital unit right here, okay?
Again to all units that are available. We're going to have a new command post on Murray Street and West Street. Any units available, report when you're all up to
We have a report now that a large plane crashed this morning north of the Somerset County Airport, which is in western Pennsylvania.
That concludes our live coverage from CNN for the moment. We'll now resume normal programming until our next special bulletins at 9:30 and again at 11:30 with Sandra Sully.
The range of emotions that I think...
Tonight following Seinfeld at 7:30 The Simpsons, then 10's new series The Weber Show. At 8:30 A Night of Temptation on Ed. Then at 9:30 The Late News with Sandra Sully.